Good afternoon, everyone. We are present today to adhere to Commission Order number 2024-341. And when I say we, I mean staff's initiation of today's status conference. I'm Jocelyn Boyd. I'm employed by the Public Service Commission. I want to introduce my colleagues before we ask who's present representing the parties in the dockets today. So first, Ms. Elise Wilson, our calendar administrator, is present in the hearing room. Our general counsel, Joanne Wessinger-Hill. Staff attorneys, Ms. Alicia Clausen and Mr. Adam Russell. Our security, Mr. Joe Biggs. Live stream producer, Melissa Purvis. And our WebEx whiz today is Jackie Knight. All right, now we will proceed to ask about representation of parties beginning with docket number 2024-144E. And may I ask who's present and representing Duke Energy Carolinas and Duke Energy Progress?
Good afternoon, Ms. Boyd. Sam Wellborn on behalf of Duke Energy Carolinas and Duke Energy Progress. I have with me co-counsel Nate Haber.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wellborn and Mr. Haber, for participating today. All right. Moving on to the interveners in docket number 2024-144E. South Carolina Office of Regulatory Staff. Ms. Mitchell, I see you. Oh, you're muted, Ms. Mitchell. Yeah, you're still showing as muted, Ms. Mitchell. Okay. I think Mr. Austin is still displaying as muted too.
Yes, I'm here as well. Ms. Mitchell's going to take on the day for us, but I'm here with her as well. She may come down to my office if we're having trouble. But we're here. Thank you.
All right. Let us know when she's arrived, okay, in your office so we can proceed.
She's here with me.
Okay. And so I didn't call the Department of Consumer Affairs' name because I don't think they're a party. They're listed, but no one's present. So they've been recognized. Okay. So, okay, that takes care. I saw Mr. Burns, like, what am I missing? I'm not missing anything in docket number 2024-144E. Let's move on now to docket number 2022-239. And our applicant in docket number 2022-239E is Duke Energy Carolinas. Mr. Wellborn and Mr. Haber, may I state that you are representing Duke Energy Carolinas in that docket?
Yes, ma'am, although Mr. Haber has not filed a notice of appearance in that docket.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and then we'll move on to the interveners. Carolinas Clean Energy Business Association.
Jocelyn Richard Witt for SECIBA, and SECIBA is planning to intervene in 144, but hasn't yet.
Okay.
But we're participating today because of the commission's order that said that 239 and 240 participants would participate in this docket.
Yes, sir.
And John Burns is the general counsel for SECIBA.
Okay.
He's also participating, and he will have comments for SECIBA.
Okay, so recognize Mr. Burns. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Hope you can hear me.
Yes, sir. We can hear you. Thank you, Mr. Burns.
Thank you.
Next, we will move on to representatives for South Carolina Coastal Conservation League, Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, and Upstate Forever. All right. I will just call the South Carolina Department of Consumer Affairs' name. I don't think a representative is present. And then Ms. Mitchell and Mr. Austin, may we reflect that you are representing the Office of Regulatory Staff in the docket number 2022-239E also?
Yes.
Perfect. Finally, docket number 2022-240E. Mr. Wellborn and Mr. Haber, for today's status conference, may I just indicate that you are representing Duke Energy Progress for that docket?
Yes, ma'am.
Perfect. And Mr. Witt and Mr. Burns, you are representing Carolina's Clean Energy Business Association in docket number 2022-240E. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Wonderful.
Yes, ma'am.
Is anyone present representing South Carolina Coastal Conservation League, SACE, or Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, or Upstate Forever? South Carolina Department of Consumer Affairs. And Ms. Mitchell and Mr. Austin, may we indicate that you also represent the South Carolina Office of Regulatory Staff in docket number 2022-240E?
Yes.
Beautiful. So I think we've covered our representation and those who are present and participating today. Thank you for doing that. So as Mr. Wellborn mentioned earlier today, why are we here? We're here because of docket order number, 2024-341, which was issued by the commission on May 16th. The first thing the commission did basically in that order was ratify opening docket number 2024-144E as it relates to Duke Energy Carolinas and Duke Energy Progress's April 23rd, 2024 letter. Okay. Then the commission instructed its staff to schedule a status conference to establish a procedural schedule for this docket, 2024-144E, as well as to clarify what the companies meant, the Duke companies mean by, quote, a streamlined proceeding, end quote, in the letter dated April 23rd. And then finally, the final paragraph, the commission references the two docket numbers, 2022-239E and 240E, and instructed its staff to provide notice of today's status conference to the parties in that docket. That, of course, was due to the Duke company's reference to those dockets in their April 23rd letter. And I think that's where we are. Okay, and then we're also supposed to consider any comments regarding the procedural schedule in docket 2024-144E, whether those comments are in person, virtually, or in written form. Okay, so Mr. Wellborn and Mr. Haber, may we just start with you about explaining what you envision, your clients envision as a streamlined proceeding, and then we can talk about more specific procedural schedule. Is that okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So, and I apologize for any confusion that that word streamline might have caused, but really what we intended by streamline was if you look back at the 2022 proceeding, the 239 and 240 dockets, we had filed an application for approval of two major components. One was the framework of how we designed competitive procurement for renewable energy, and then also of the 2022 request for proposals, or RFP. And so if you look back at the commission's order, you know, its findings and conclusions and ordering paragraphs around kind of those two fundamental elements. One, is the framework reasonable? Mm-hmm. And then two, does the 2022 RFP square against that reasonable framework? Now that we have gotten the commission's approval of the framework itself, in our view, that would not be at issue in this docket. Instead, it would be that second part of the commission's evaluation, which is, did the 2023 RFP, does it square against the framework? You know, does it result in just and reasonable resources, et cetera? And so that was part of what we meant by streamline. Okay. The other part of what we meant by streamline was in the last proceeding, we had filed it prior to the conclusion of the 2022 RFP. So if you'll remember, we filed an application, and I can't remember when exactly it was filed, but you know, I want to say summer of 2022 or something. It was kind of a while ago. Mm-hmm. And then in order to allow the commission to more fully evaluate the 2022 RFP, that docket was held, those dockets were held in abeyance mm-hmm. while we waited for the RFP to bear out and complete. That dynamic won't exist for the 2023 RFP because it's ongoing now. It'll wrap up this summer, and I think under the procedural schedule that we would envision, we would have the results of that RFP as parties were preparing, you know, before parties were preparing their testimony. And so streamline really, you know, was intended to capture those two things. So one, commission's already evaluated the framework, not at issue in this docket. but it hasn't had an opportunity to review the 2023 RFP like it did the 22 RFP and square it against the framework that the commission has approved. And then second, because we are where we are in time, we won't have a need to hold the proceeding in abeyance. Instead, we can jump right in. We'll have the results by the time we file testimony, and the parties in the commission will be able to evaluate the 23 RFP results on kind of a shorter timeline than that previous proceeding took, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. I don't want to call it a baseline, but the framework hadn't been established with the 2022, and it has been established now. So that's what you meant. I understand that. Ms. Hill, Mr. Russell, or Ms. Clausen, do y'all have any questions about? Okay. All right. Great. So I think we understand. Mr. Wellborn said something I was going to. Oh, I know. So I was speaking to our calendar administrator about when you anticipate filing the application in docket 2024-144E. And I think your paperwork said, your letter indicated late June 24, right? So then we were looking at the calendar and speculating regarding maybe the time period for a hearing. And one of the concerns is, do you think the hearing should be scheduled prior to your IRP hearing, I think, which is in September? Yeah. Yeah. Do you think you want to, that was just something for us to consider. Do you think it would be wise to establish a schedule for a hearing prior to September 16th?
So that's not how we were necessarily looking at it.
Okay.
And I don't know that timing
impacts this case.
Yeah,
That's fine.
I think they can be looked at distinctly.
Okay.
Frankly, the quantities all continue to line up, and I don't see that as being. In other words, I don't see the IRP decision or
Okay.
decision-making process bearing necessarily on the RFP.
Okay.
The way that we had looked at it and kind of sketching out what a potential procedural schedule might look like is just looking at the last proceeding. So like the amount of time between when testimony was filed as part of that second phase. And, there were some adjustments based on holidays and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But we had been thinking of a hearing in early December, but recognize that, the commission's calendar, I don't know what you'll have going on in early December, but.
Well, let me ask you this, though. Don't you want to order by the end of December? But I'm just asking. I think I noticed that. Didn't you say, didn't the letter say the order?
Did it say?
I
don't
by
know.
The end of 24.
I think that was a goal, but
Okay.
But I just looking at the 22 RFP proceeding, the hearing was December 12th.
Okay.
And so we kind of modeled on that, but hopefully I haven't gotten y'all working too hard trying to shoot for the end of 2024. No. I just, we want to create enough space in the schedule for folks to be able to do discovery and prepare testimony and that kind of thing. So.
Okay. So yeah, I'm just looking at the one of the two CPRE dockets for the Duke companies, and the hearing in 2023 was December 12th. Yeah. So perfect. Okay, I'll come back to you about other like testimony in those dates, if you don't mind, Mr. Welborn and Mr. Haber. Let's start with Mr. Burns. Mr. Burns, what are your thoughts? Did you have any other comments? Did you have questions regarding the streamlined proceeding? The issue.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, regarding what Mr. Welborn explained, the commissioners asked us to ask the companies what it meant by, or they meant by streamlined proceeding. Did you have any questions or statements that you wanted to make regarding that?
Only that Mr. Welburn's explanation seems perfectly reasonable to me. We had actually read that to mean that we might conduct this proceeding on paper, reserving the right to call for an evidentiary hearing should issues arise in submitted documents and testimony, or comments. So I think, as Mr. Welburn stated, we had some fights over what the framework should look like, and so that's put to bed and that's been established. So this is more along the lines of are they meeting their forecast? Are they procuring sufficient resources to meet their stated goals? And that is that's going to be less, I think, controversial. But we would be okay with it as a paper proceeding, provided the parties have the right to call for an evidentiary hearing if necessary. That may be a little more streamlined than even Mr. Welburn had talked about, but we wouldn't necessarily object to that approach either.
Okay.
If that's something that can be done under South Carolina procedure, it seems to me that might be a way to do it. But I'll defer to the South Carolina lawyers in the room on that one.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. And maybe what we can also discuss is including in the notice, Ms. Hill and Mr. Russell and Ms. Clausen, we schedule that hearing date if necessary, so that we're not worried about getting, having an issue if a hearing is needed and then we haven't reserved the time before the end of the year.
That would seem prudent to me, ma'am.
Okay. Perfect. Okay.
One further thing to follow up on a interchange y'all had, we would think that trying to get it done in September would be way too quick, given the burdens on us and the companies in terms of both dockets in both states that are really pressed over the next couple of months. I think that would be a little ambitious.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So now we're going to move to Mr. Austin and Ms. Mitchell. What are did you have any comments regarding the streamlined proceeding? Did you have concerns? Do you have concerns? Are you okay with Mr. Welborn's summary?
I think we are, to the extent of, we believe that holding a hearing in September would probably be a little bit too quick and too fast, given the application hasn't been filed yet, and we're still waiting on the report from the independent evaluator. And so we really looked at the testimony being filed maybe in September, because that would give the parties opportunity to receive the application, review it, receive the report from the independent evaluator, have a couple of months of discovery, and then for September 1st would be maybe direct is filed, and then October 1st, ORS and other parties would file their direct, and then by mid-October, rebuttal could be filed, and at the end of October, ORS and other parties could file their cert rebuttal. And so that would really set up the hearing to occur November 11th or the week of November the 18th. So then a final order could be provided by the end of 2024.
Thank you, Ms. Mitchell. Okay, so what we need to do now is, Miss Administrator, do we have anything availability the week of, November 11th or the 18th? Right now? Okay, November 11th is a holiday. So maybe the 12th through the 15th. What's that on our thing? Is that NARUC? Okay. And then what's on the 18th? Anything? Okay, I'm going to return to Mr. Welborn now. Mr. Welborn, what do you think about Ms. Mitchell and Mr. Austin's proposal?
We had a little bit of a slower schedule, and I know that I had set a decision by the end of 2024 in the cover letter, and I think that's fouling things up some. But given, various hearings and other things that folks have going on, we had ourselves planning to file testimony in mid-August.
Okay.
And we'll have the independent evaluators report by that point and can file that along with our testimony for the parties' review. We had ORS's testimony being filed mid-October. So that's, 2 months, August, September, after we file our testimony and the IE's report, and that gives time for discovery and, whatever they need to be doing on their side.
Mm-hmm.
And then rebuttal testimony early November. So I have November 6th as a sketch date for our rebuttal testimony. And then if any surrebuttal's warranted, November 20th is the date that I had with a hearing early December. I have December 10th as a date, but I think we could go earlier than that if helpful. Though I can't remember when Thanksgiving is. It's probably between those two, right?
Yes, sir. Thanksgiving is November 28th, 29th. I mean, 28th.
Thank you.
Or the 10th, so maybe the 4th of December or December 10th.
And to Mr. Burns' point, it may be that we can get away without a hearing. That would be ideal, right?
Right.
But certainly we should plan for the worst while hoping for the best. So.
Right. So, Ms. Hill, should the testimony be verified? If that's when they file it, basically, if they end up asking for expedited review. Mm-hmm. Okay. So thank you, Mr. Welborn. I need to loop around back to Mr. Byrne. Mr. Byrne, how do you feel about either schedule? Do you prefer the hearing to be, well, let me start with the testimony. A or B? No, I'm just teasing.
The schedule that Mr. Welborn just laid out seems pretty reasonable to me. I would, just for all of our sakes and those of our respective significant others, would suggest the evidentiary hearing not be the immediate week after Thanksgiving.
Okay.
But, I think that schedule seems pretty reasonable to me.
Okay. All right, so you're okay with Mr. Welborn's schedule. Ms. Mitchell, would you help me out? Did you hear the proposed timeline for testimony from Mr. Welborn? So mid-August, which, Elise, could you give me like a date around mid-August and mid-October, maybe we can, so mid-August would be August 15th? Okay, perfect. So I'm going to say August 15th, Ms. Mitchell. And then let's look at a date for mid-October, please. 9/16. Oh, 10/16. Oh. 10/15. Okay. Okay. So, Ms. Mitchell, what about a proposal that includes the company's direct testimony being filed no later than August 15th, and that will include the independent evaluator's report? And then all of the parties, including the Office of Regulatory Staff's direct testimony, will be filed no later than October 15th. Rebuttal testimony filed no later than November 6th, and surrebuttal testimony filed no later than November 20th, with a hearing date of, if needed, December 10th.
I think that's good.
That works.
We'll be able to work within that.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Mitchell. Okay. So I think I've asked I've asked everyone. Does anyone have any other comments regarding your schedule and the dates? Okay, no, Mr. Welborn.
Yes, ma'am. I don't see why not. I had the 16th for both of those, but you know, a day here or there is fine with me. So.
Okay. So, and then I think maybe unless someone has a problem with this, we would modify our pre-file testimony letter to say, verified direct, verified rebuttal. And then the hearing date will say if necessary. So we'll reserve if necessary. The date will be reserved on our calendar. Okay, I know we have a couple more weeks before you intend to file, Mr. Welborn, but we'll have our notes. Okay, so Mr. Welborn, I'm back to you. Do you have any other thoughts before we end?
No, ma'am. I appreciate your time and the party's time.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Burns, do you have any thoughts that you'd like to share?
No, ma'am.
Perfect.
Thank you very much for your time.
Yes, thank you. Miss Mitchell?
Yes, we do just have something that we did want to put for the parties and the commission.
Okay.
Or as may believe that there may be a question of law just regarding the frequency that the commission intends or wants to review each procurement of renewable resources. And so, of course, before I think any testimony would be filed, ORS may reach out to the parties and the commission in order to discuss that potential question of law that may impact this docket and other CPRE dockets.
Okay. So a question of law regarding the commission's frequency of reviewing CPRE applications,
so
petitions.
We may actually ask the commission to open a generic docket in order to review a potential question of law.
Okay.
And then, of course, include the other utilities that may be impacted by the CPRE dockets.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for letting us know that could be a potential filing in the future. Okay, Ms. Mitchell, do you have anything else?
No, not at this time.
Okay, thank you. All right, I don't think I missed anyone. Thank you all for all the notice you've provided us today. Ms. Welborn, you have something?
I'm sorry to interject. That I'm processing
Ms. Mitchell?
the generic docket. Yes. Okay. So we're currently on a trajectory to file our application in about 3 weeks, which means we'll be working on that soon. I guess I'm just processing. There's not an ask or any. I'm wondering whether we should be spending time now working on the application. I think the answer is yes. Maybe the question is, do we know when we should expect the initiation of a generic docket? And it's fine if we don't, but it might be a helpful data point.
At this time, we are still internally discussing how we would want to move forward. So right now, I cannot immediately answer that.
Okay.
And that's what I was going to say. You could even have a motion in this docket as well, if that would be helpful, before even initiating the generic docket, or as can make the request for, because this is the first time we've heard it as well.
Thank you. That's all.
You're welcome. Okay. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for participating today, and we'll wait to see what's filed, but we will proceed with the schedule, until the commissioners tell us otherwise. Okay? All right, Mr. Welborn, Mr. Haber, have a good afternoon. Ms. Mitchell, Mr. Austin, take care, and Mr. Burns and Mr. Witts, we'll see you soon.
All right. Thank you, Jocelyn.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jocelyn.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.